framework that I wanted to follow was just give a sort of quick overlay of like some big themes and like some general overviews of like why hardship exists in the first place, and what's the like purpose behind it and some of the wisdoms behind it, and then some like general themes and general like ideas that apply like throughout the board, and then give like one or two examples of some of the stories from the life of the Sahaba and what we can learn. And then really what I'd like to have at the end is like more of discussion on like what people are like going through right now, and then kind of like what has helped some people, and sort of talking about how we can implement some of these things in our own lives, and like what are some like specific strategies to use that we can apply into our own lives, inshallah. So the first, I wanted to actually just start off with why hardship happens in the first place, and why we face difficulties in the first place. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran that He is the one الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا, the famous verse that many of us memorize. So it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one who created the life and death really to test and see which one of you is going to be the best in deeds. And if you think about it, actually, it's like the nature of the universe is that you can only have an opportunity to do good if some type of imbalance exists. If some type of a difficulty exists, that is the only way that you're able to do something good, and you're able to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you want to do something good, is when there's a need to do something good. And that definitely almost like by definition means that there's some difficulty going on the other side. Another thing, another sort of benefit of why suffering exists in the first place is actually it's actually a reminder, I think, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to you to make sure to reorganize the priorities in your life. And what I mean by that is, so there's one khutbah that I was at that I thought the Sheikh gave a really sort of interesting analogy, which is that, so imagine you're working in a construction zone, and then there's a bunch of noise going on, there's a bunch of different stuff going on, and so the manager from the top wants to communicate and tell someone, tell one of the people down below about something really important. So he tries shouting, but there's too much noise. He tries doing some other signals, but the guy's like, he's all the way down there, so he's not looking up, so he can't see, so he's just looking at things around him. And then so he tries to like drop some money just to see if the guy will look at it or not. And then what he ends up doing is looking, oh wow, there's a $5 bill, and he just takes it and then goes about his day. But what the manager ends up doing is he takes some rocks and just throws it on his head. So when he gets hit with a rock, then that's the time he looks up and he sees, oh, the manager needs to tell me something, like something needs, there's something important that I need to know. So walillahi al-mathalu al-a'la, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the best of examples, and all types of examples that we do is just like an approximation of trying to get at some point. So in this example, it's like the person at the bottom is like all of us in the dunya. There's like so much noise going on. There's so much like distractions going on around us. And sometimes we lose sight of like why we're in this dunya to begin with, like what's the purpose of life. And if we get more money, if we get more rizq, a lot of times that's like, oh great, I found money, gonna keep doing that, keep doing what I'm doing. But when a calamity hits, that's when people take a step back and say, okay, what just happened? Like, what am I doing? Like, I need to like reevaluate, like, so many aspects of my life to figure out like what just happened and like where I'm going to go from here. And this is actually like very sort of natural in human psychology and happens all the time. Like, I think a year or so back, there was like the story of this one person who was like this rich guy. He he was diagnosed with cancer. And then like that actually just made him like realize like everything he was doing, like this rich businessman, all this money, and like really at the end of the day, like what does that what does that really amount to, and so he's able to like go and like start some charity organizations and do all this like good work. And at the end of his life, he was like, this past 8 months that I've had cancer has really just been the most important part of my life. And I actually like that that initial shock, which then, you know, turns into like patience, and then it ends up like turning into like gratitude at the end. So sometimes it's really, you really have to dig deep and like find the sort of positive aspects in life, and that's going to be actually one of the things that we're going to come to. So so one of the other things, one of the other reasons why difficulty happens is, you know, sometimes it is a consequence of our own actions. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, either, you know, through on a societal level, you know, if we're doing all these things and then, you know, causing all this like problems to the environment, and then, you know, the climate change will happen, and then all these climate crises, you know, that's a sort of a direct consequence of like the things that we've been doing. You know, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس, that the like corruption and like destruction was spread on earth because of what people themselves are doing to it. And then on another level, there, it might also be that, you know, you've been so far away, and then you're like, or maybe you're, you know, someone's doing some type of oppression that they don't realize until like, you know, something happens in your life that forces you to like reevaluate that, and then you realize that, you know, maybe this is a sign that I need to like stop doing what I'm doing. And last but not least, I think what actually feels like a lot of the times on an individual level is we don't know why exactly. So sometimes things will happen in life that, you know, makes you just wonder like why, like I don't get it. Like there's like this happens, and then like sometimes things happen like all of a sudden, sometimes things happen like just like one after the other right away, and then it just like leaves you kind of speechless, like what, like I don't understand, like what's the wisdom behind this, you know? And that's really, I think that's actually a real key to leading up to the next point, which is actually just the sort of general themes that I wanted to talk about, the general themes to keep in mind when dealing with any type of hardship. And those are sabr, tawakkul, and shukr. I guess they're all kind of intertwined. Patience, relying on Allah, and being thankful to Allah. So one of the things that, you know, that the Quran teaches and the life of the Prophet ﷺ teaches, and Islam really teaches us, is that we really have to look at the positive side of things and have a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So like in the famous hadith Qudsi, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says through the Prophet ﷺ that أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي بِي وَأَنَا مَعَهُ إِذَا دَعَانِي. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I am to my slave the same way he assumes of me. Like I am, so like the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in your head is basically, that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to end up, that's how you're going to view him. So an example of this is like, if you take every single opportunity or like every single difficulty that you have to mean that, oh, God hates me, then that's the kind of life you're going to live, and then everything else you do, you will like fit in everything else into the, oh yeah, you know, this is just another proof that God hates me. This is just another evidence that God hates me. Oh, you know, see, I knew God hates me, you know, for something I did once, or like I just know that God hates me, and so that's why everything's happening to me. Whereas you know, within the same context, if you just flipped it around and said, you know, this is something that I needed to go through because I know it's going to make me a better person, and it's going to make my life more meaningful in the future. That, you know, it can be really, really hard to do that, especially, you know, for people who have just gone through, you know, a difficulty like a death of a loved one, or, you know, loss of a job, or people if they've gone through divorce, like these things like really, really like hard on people, and it is really something really hard to go through, and it really makes you question, and it really kind of, you know, it's hard to have that good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes, and it's a very sort of natural thing to do. But what the kind of the stories that inshallah we'll talk about, and what really the life of the prophets and the life of all the Anbiya show, is that that, you know, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he does, nothing happens except by his will, right? So we all know this from a theoretical level, but when it practically comes down to it, this is where this concept of tawakkul comes in. That was the other thing that I was talking about, where you trust that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making you go through is not by accident, and it has a wisdom, even if it's not apparent to you at that moment in time. And sometimes every evidence point to the fact that there's no wisdom, like there's no benefit to what just happened. But that's where your real tawakkul is tested, of whether or not you have that faith, and whether or not you trust that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or when the Prophet ﷺ says, for example, that عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. That strange is the affair of the believer, because anything that happens to him or her, all of it is good for them. So if a calamity befalls upon them and they're patient, and that's good for them, and if they get something good, or a ni'mah comes to them and they're patient upon that, that is good for them as well. So that's when when your tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really comes into play. Sorry, one second. And yeah, so there's a beautiful ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. That it may be that you hate something, but it is actually good for you. And it may be that you actually love something and it's actually bad for you. And many a times, when we're just in our sort of like narrow vision that we have, it's hard to see like why something that this many times it happens, like you think that this job offer that you have is like the best, or like this career that you wanted to go into, and this major that you wanted to get into, like this is going to be the best for me, and then you don't end up getting into it. Then you're like oh my god, like what just happened? Like I knew this was the best thing for me, and yet I didn't get in, or like I didn't get this job, or I didn't get married to that one person that I wanted to get married to. Like all of that can really take a toll on you in terms of like challenging your iman and challenging what you have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in those moments, having that trust is something, it's not easy to do, but we see it all the time. And all the time we see people that they wanted so hard to marry that one person, and then after they get into that marriage, like a few years later it crumbles. And then people look back and they go like, oh my god, like what was I thinking? Like all of these red flags were there. I like now it's easy to think because the hindsight is 2020. And so, or you got into this one job and then you just realized it was miserable and it didn't even help you get to like advance into your other goals in your career and your life. And then you look back and you're like, yeah, what was I even thinking? And so learn from other people's sort of experience and have that tawakkul. And it's not something easy to do, once again. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, another so the qadr of Allah, this is another thing I wanted to talk about. So the qadr of Allah and what He's decreed for you, this is also where that belief will be challenged, because a lot of times people difficulty happens to them, and the next question they ask is why is God, who's so merciful, allow suffering at all? Why isn't there a world where there's no suffering? And all these other type of philosophical questions, which really come out of an emotional place of like something difficult that happened to you. And then we can and this is not the time and the place for it, but there's always like there's a lot of answers to that, and there's a lot of like places for discussion for that. We can get into that later if people have questions, inshallah. But so these questions come up. And the question of like the qadr of Allah comes up. So there's an ayah in the Quran, قُلْ لَن يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا هُوَ مَوْلَانَا وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. That the Prophet ﷺ is being told to tell the people that لَن يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا, that nothing hits us of calamity except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows about it, and He is our protector. And upon Him, وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, that upon Him do the believers place their trust. And one of the there's one point about qadr of Allah and like the test that you go through that I found really profound, that someone once said, which was that if you knew everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows like the past, present, future. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the things that didn't happen, if they happened, how they would happen, and what they would lead to. So someone one of the sheikhs once said that if you knew everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew, and with that knowledge, you had to design your own life, you would not make a single change to the way your life went about. Like, think about that. Everything that's happening, to your life is being made with like laser precision. That if you knew every single thing about the universe and you had to design your own life, you wouldn't change a single iota of what happens, because you see, what the consequences are of like going any type of different way. So one of the sheikhs, he's like, this one time, his job was to, they were doing some like Islamic conference, and his job was to bring like all these like materials and like the cassettes that they were going to give to the people and the food. So he had all this stuff in his car, and he was going, to the conference to give all the stuff to the people. And on the way, like in the parking lot, as he was like, reversing out, he ended up like hitting this pillar, and like his whole car like got damaged from the back, and to the point where like the oil started leaking or something happened where like he wasn't able to go. So in his head, he's like, this was like a big shock. Like, I'm trying to do something like for the deen. I'm trying to do something for the sake of Allah. Like why would this happen? Why would this happen like right now to me? Like it's like, it's so you wouldn't be able to like understand it, right? But if you take a step back, I can think of 1,000 different ways where this might have actually been the best thing to happen to this brother. For example, if he went onto the freeway, you don't know, there might have been a drunk driver, there might have been some kind of accident, there might have been something where like his whole life, like he might have actually died, like he might have gone into a car accident and he might have died, or sometimes, for some people it's worse, that the person that you're bringing with you, you get into a car accident, they die and you stay alive, and then you live with that guilt for the rest of your life. And like so many different scenarios, that if we were forced to think about it, we can see how, maybe what happened here was actually the best. And because it's theoretically possible, and it's actually almost like there's a million different scenarios that are possible in which what happened was actually best for that person. That's why this is where your iman comes in. This is where your faith, this is where your tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes in, where you realize that, yeah, what happened was, was exactly what should have happened. And at that point, for the people, what's required of you is to have that patience, right? And the ayah that comes to mind is, and this is going to be my quiz for the day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. So one of the interesting places where the reward of a certain group of people is mentioned as happening بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ, without, this group of people will be rewarded without having any questions asked of them, بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ, without having any account taken of them, without having any questions asked of them. And those are the people, as-sabirun. Why do you think? What's the gem? What's the juicy secret in this ayah? Like, why is it that the sabirun are mentioned, the people who have sabr? Why is it they are mentioned specifically as being the people who will enter Jannah without any questions asked to them? Let's hear from the people. Where are people at?
I feel like it's a beautiful mirroring in that they weren't sitting there going, why me? Right? Exactly. They weren't asking questions.
Exactly.
So they weren't asking questions.
Yeah, exactly. And the type of questions, exactly, it's the right type of questions. Asking why in this dunya, in terms of like, in this context of what we're talking about, asking why here really doesn't have much benefit, except if it's asked with the question of, what can I do differently next time so it doesn't happen again? Or how can I learn from this experience? How can I learn from what's happening now so that I don't make the same mistake again? Or what are the benefits that I can take now that'll help me in my life in the future? But the question of, why did this happen to me? Why did God do this to me? The people who don't ask why here won't be asked why in the day of judgment. Because at the end of the day, the Prophet said, "Man su'ila yawm al-qiyamati faqad halak." Like, whoever is asked on the day of judgment. So, on the 21st of October, 2021, you did X, Y, and Z. What's up with that? Like why did you do that? Anybody who's asked that question, you're done. Like, anybody who is asked, "Man su'ila yawm al-qiyamah faqad halak," like, you are done. What we should all be aiming for is to get into Jannah without any hisab, because really, at the end of the day, nobody gets into Jannah except by the love and the kindness and the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anyways, right? So that's what we should be aiming for. Anyways, cool. Extra credit. Let's see. Where did I want to go next? So yeah, okay. So in terms of the difficulties that the Sahaba faced, really, if you look at it, every single type of difficulty that we're going through, there was a certain Sahabi that went through that difficulty. Whether if it's like financial difficulty, I mean, so many of the Sahaba went through so much financial difficulty. Whether it's the hardship of losing, beloved people, people that are beloved to us, we can find many examples of that. Whether if it's an example of like emotional difficulty and like maybe like social isolation, we can find examples of Sahaba going through that. Examples of, difficult families, struggling with parents, you can find examples of Sahaba going through that. So really it's, and the three sort of general themes that I mentioned of patience, tawakkul, and shukr, those, essentially all the stories of the Sahaba, these are the underlying themes that are like there throughout. And that's what really, what's it called? That's really, I think, the lesson that you can learn from all the stories of the Sahaba. So I'm just going to go through one or two, or maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do a poll on, because I wanted to figure out what are some, what's an example of, like, so everyone who's here, we have 13 people in here. What are some examples of difficulties that you have faced or that you have seen the most, within your immediate circle in the past year? And I wanted to do a poll so that based on like what the most people have been going through, then we can take some of the stories of the Sahaba related to that. Let me see. So let me see if I can do this. Should I share my screen? Just like this poll. I feel like you'd think I'd be well versed in this by now, within like a whole year of being in the pandemic, but let's see.
You're good.
Let's figure this out. Let's see if this works. So, are people able to see the screen? And is this working? How am I supposed to start this? Oh, yes. Central screen. Oh, let's see. Does that work? Let me know if this is working. Man, I'm like a real uncle now. I don't know how to do this stuff.
Yes, we can see the screen.
All right. Let's see if people can put in some answers. It doesn't have to be a whole thesis. Just be like one or two words. All right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Academics. Yeah. I think so for other people, all right. Yeah, okay, so let's see. Academics, GPA dropping, aligning yourself with the right people, loss of motivation, loneliness, procrastination, yeah, family health, balancing. Yep, definitely. I think that this is probably a pretty representative sample in terms of like what most people are going through. So let's see if I can get back onto this. All right. Clear. Okay, so let's one story that I wanted to talk about was the story of Jabir radiallahu anhu and his camel. And this is actually called the famous incident of Jabir and his camel. So Jabir radiallahu anhu, he is a Sahabi, he was a young Sahabi in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His father became a shaheed in one of the early battles, and he left 10 kids behind, Jabir and 9 young daughters. And so this story is mentioned actually in like almost every book of hadith. The sort of version I'm going to go with is one in Ibn Majah. That's just for all the nerds who are wondering. So they were coming back from one of the expeditions, and Jabir radiallahu anhu. So the only thing he had was one camel that his dad had left behind, and he had this like large family, like 9 sisters he had to take care of. He had no other sort of social support. So they're coming back from this one expedition, and his camel is like really old and like really slow, so it's like lagging behind like the rest of the entire group. And so he's back there, and then lo and behold, he's riding, and then all of a sudden someone comes up to him from his side and says, "Oh, who are you?" And he notices it's the Prophet ﷺ, who actually that comes up behind him, and he says, "Oh, I'm Jabir." And so the Prophet ﷺ asks, "Why so sad? Like, why are you so like munkasir? Like you look like you're so beat down. Like what's going on?" So he said, "Ya Rasulullah, my dad died, passed away. I have 9 sisters, and all I have is this slow, useless camel that I can't get any benefit out of." And so the Prophet ﷺ says, "Okay, sit down. Make the camel sit down." And so he gets up, he gets off the camel, and then one of the sticks that they have that they like hit the camel with to like get it to go up. So the Prophet ﷺ blew on the stick, and then he tapped on the camel, and then so what happened was, through the barakah of that, the camel became so like energetic to the point where he started like becoming like one of the really fast ones and going to the front of the line. So basically, like camels are like, it's like the assets, like the investments of people back in the day. If they can milk, you can sell the milk. If they have if they have more camel babies, you can sell the babies, and then you can sell it if it's like a really good one, you can sell it for a lot of money, and you can use that for a lot of benefit as well. So his camel started getting really like fast and going to the front, to the point where he had to like sort of like hold it back and have it come back to the Prophet so he can be with the Prophet. So after all this, like he's like getting so excited that finally, oh my God, like something good happened. And then the Prophet when he meets up with him, he says bi'aniha, like the Prophet says to him, "Now sell the camel to me." He says fastahiyat, like I became shy, like this just happened, and he was like hoping to use this for like all this stuff. And then so the Prophet asks him to like sell the camel to him. So he says, "Fastahiyat, like I became shy, so I told him, Ya Rasulullah, like Ya Rasulullah, like just take it. I'll give it to you as a gift. Like I don't want to sell you a camel. So the Prophet said, "No, Ghafarallahu lak, no, bi'aniha." Like he says, "No, you have to what's it called? No, I don't want to take it as a gift. I want to buy it, with its right price." And he said, like, I went to like back and forth like 20 times with the Prophet, like saying, "I don't know, I just take it." So at the end, Jabir finally gives in, and he says, "Okay, Rasulullah, like, okay, I'll buy it to you." And then so what should the price be? And so the Prophet said, "I'll buy it to you for like 1 dirham," and this is like $5. So then afterwards, then he's like, "No, the Prophet, like $5, like the camel's worth like way more than that." Like he's like, "No, like you can't do it for $5. I'm gonna be at a loss here." So he said, "Okay, like 2 dirhams." And then so they like go back and forth up until the point where he gets to like the price of like the price of like a really good camel. So the Prophet says, "Okay, like I'll buy it for this price." And Jabir says, "Okay, good." And then so when they get back to Medina the next day, Jabir, radiallahu anh, comes, and then he actually, when he goes home, he tells his uncle, like, this is what happened. And his uncle's like, why did you sell this camel? Like, we finally had something that was working. And but he's like, and then he's told his wife, and his wife was like, "You know what, you told it to the Prophet, you can't go back, so you go and give it to him." So the next morning he goes and gives the camel, or like he ties the camel next to the house of the Prophet. And then after they pray, the Prophet looks at the camel. He's like, what's his camel? So the people said, "Oh, it's Jabir's camel." And then so he says, "Where's Jabir?" So then Jabir gets up, And then so the Prophet tells Bilal, okay, so go give him his uqiyya, like the whole amount of money for the camel, and increase it and add a lot more on top of it. So then Bilal goes and then finds all gets all the money, gets all that extra, and gives it to Jabir. And then as Jabir is like walking away with the money, the Prophet says, "Ya ibn akhi," like oh son of my brother, like because he's like 17 years old. So he looks back and then the Prophet says, "Did you think that we were gonna just take your camel from you?" He's like, "Go take the camel and then take the money. This is all for you." And so this story actually is like interesting because like, believe it or not, like so many people have written like booklets and like so much stuff about like the benefits of this story. And one of the things I really thought was so interesting was, I mean, just so let's start from the beginning. You're in this huge caravan, and the Prophet ﷺ notices that a 17-year-old boy is in the back, like by himself. And so he goes by himself. The leader of the army goes by himself and to go and talk with him directly. So the first thing to learn, I think, from this is we all are going through difficulty, and we all know some people who are also going through a lot of difficulty. And so just the importance of just reaching out. I think this is the first thing, is the importance of just reaching out and like just checking in on people, because really it helps both you and it helps that person. And so that's the first benefit. And the second benefit is the Prophet ﷺ notices that he's so like down, and then realizes that his dad had died as a shaheed. And actually also I didn't I skipped part of the story, which is that like he gives him glad tidings of like what his father, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like dealt with his father, all that stuff that I didn't want to go into. But so another point of there is like give encouraging words to people, even if you think it's not, even if you think it's not much. If you're genuine and you're just like inshallah, things are going to be okay. We just have to keep at it together. We just got to stay in touch with each other. We just got to like just say. I don't have to tell you what exactly to say. Like who you are. How you talk to people, and what will come across as genuine from yourself. So like reach out to people, be genuine with people, and just try to be encouraging and try to be positive with people. And then this whole like thing of like going back and forth and talking. So you realize Jabir's probably like being in the back of the army, he's been so lonely, and he's just like a 17-year-old boy. He doesn't have much like social support and stuff. So the Prophet is just using some excuse to like talk with him, some excuse to like go back and forth, just have some banter with him, some fun here and there. And then at the end, like also give him something that he needed. So just have that like attitude and that character of like wanting, like being like genuinely like interested in the welfare of people. And I think that'll come across very it comes across very well. 1 second, make sure the timing. So yeah, God, of course, with every Islamic talk, the guy goes on, and then there's no time left. So okay, one last thing. I'll just touch on one last thing. So isolation. I think isolation is a very, very. It's not a small thing to be like joked around with, because even in prisons, like what is the worst punishment prisoners get?
Solitary
confinement. So I mean, it really goes to show like human beings, we are like social creatures. Like we need like to talk to people, we need like support. And so this has definitely been like difficult times and trying times for people. One thing that kind of I mentioned earlier, like it's hard to reach out, but like really reach out to people and like try to have establish some connection and some bond, and keep some sort of like physical, if you can do physical contact, at least some social contact with people. And I know people are trying as much as they can, but in the time where sometimes it's just difficult and you just have to like learn to be alone, I think the famous story of Ka'b ibn Malik, where he was going to follow the Prophet into the expedition of Tabuk, but he got delayed, and to the point where they were just too far ahead, and he couldn't be with them. So then when the Prophet, very very brief overview, when the Prophet came back and he was finding out like who who else had to stay behind and what happened. And so when Ka'b ibn Malik came, he was honest with the Prophet that, I don't have any excuse. I should have been with you, and then, I can't, what's it called? I don't have any excuse. So the commandment came that for Ka'b ibn Malik, like, people should, isolate from them socially. So this is, this is not something that's given as a general punishment. This is not something that's condoned by like Sharia as a punishment for people. But this is, these are the three like major top Sahabi. So they're given this they're given this very unique and difficult test to go through, and from that is something for us to learn. So Ka'b ibn Malik, he's it got to the point where he was like isolated to the point where like people weren't like returning his salams because they had to sort of kind of like distance themselves from him. And so it was a three Sahabi, and what they did was, in times of isolation, that's when you kind of goes back to the point of like you have to like refigure out like what you're doing with your life, and you like reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I just want to give a big plug to, if you don't have like a sort of a regular like dhikr regimen, a regular sort of dua regimen, a regular ibadah regimen, any type of like Quran recitation regimen, I mean, this is really the time where this is the perfect opportunity to start building those habits, because you have the time. And back in the day, like you might have distractions, like you want to do something, but your friends are going on, so all those priorities get mixed up. But at this point, like when you don't like you don't have any choice but to like what's it called, prioritize what you think is important. This is the best time to build those habits. And really the whole purpose of your life, I'm just end with this last 1-2 minutes, the whole purpose of your life really is to recognize why you're here, to recognize who your creator is, and to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that so you prepare for your akhirah. As cliche as that sounds, especially for all of you people who are well educated, going to college and stuff, as cliche as that sounds, it's really that's really like at the heart of what life is. And so prepare for that day, and like think about like how you're going to come and how you're going to meet up with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and make dua. Like you really there's no way to establish a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except through the way that's taught by the Prophet, which is dua. Dua huwa al-ibadah, as the Prophet says, that dua is ibadah. And how you make dua, I wish we could spend more time on that, but really like just read Surah Nuh. So Surah Nuh is Surah in the 29th juz. Just read Surah Nuh just to get a sense. The entire surah is a dua. And sometimes you read the surah and you won't realize, like, usually dua is like you're just asking for something. What do you think of dua is like, oh, we just ask Allah, oh, give me this, give me this, give me this. But you read Surah Nuh and like try to find like some good lectures online. There's a lot of good people and shaykh that have given like tafsirs on Surah Nuh. But if you can like take a homework from this, read Surah Nuh and read how Nuh alayhi salam talks to Allah, how he talks to Allah. Like despite all his difficulties, what was the thing that made it so that a man who lived 1,000 years and only had very few followers, how he was able to get through those 1,000 years? It's by this dua. This is how you do it. This is how you get through any difficulty in life, because whatever happens, people will disappoint you, family members will disappoint you, you'll have expectations from everyone, and people will disappoint you, but Allah is in control and Allah will not disappoint you. And I end off with this hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Inna Allah idha ahabba abdan ibtalahu," that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he loves a servant, he makes him go through some trials and some difficulties. So just know that if you're going through a lot, this is never ever ever a sign that you've been abandoned by Allah, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates you. That take this as a sign that in Allah idha habba abdan ibtalahu, like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves a servant, he makes him go through difficulty so that he can raise his ranks, and so that he can make him mold him or her into the best person that they can be. Okay, great. Obviously, there wasn't much time left for reflections, but if people have some questions, if people have some like thoughts, if people have like good things that they've learned that they'd like to share, like please, I think that's like so much more
I have
valuable.
a shameless plug.
Yes,
So,
shameful or shameless.
Farah Mitzbah and I hosted the conversation on mental health in the first 2 rounds. And it's so incredible because she went into the dua room and I came in here. And what you guys are talking about is essentially a reflection on what we were talking about earlier. And when we were having this conversation, we used the analogy of a backpack, right? Mm-hmm. And like all of these stressors that you guys have on the screen as like different rocks that we put into our backpack. And when you mentioned things like sabr, tawakkul, shukr, these are tools that help us carry that backpack and keep going up that mountain, right? But the interesting thing is for us as Muslims, we have this like stone in our backpack that's called like colonization / disconnection, where we're not in tune with our own cosmology. We're not in tune with all of the things that you were talking about and how that relates like this to mental health, right? And so we're hosting a conversation from 3 to 4, 3:43 to 3:45. So the link is in the chat. And I would love to continue this conversation and we can like integrate all of the things that we were learning about because they're so connected and they're not in isolation of each other.
100%, 100%. Yeah. Jazakallah khair, jazakallah khair. Yeah, I will.